Thank you all for joining us. I'm Daryl Jones, Senior Associate Director of Admissions, Coordinator for Multicultural Admission, and our Intercollegiate Athletics Liaison at Gettysburg College. First, I want to say a hearty congratulations to those who are joining us who were just admitted into the class of 2025. We're going to wait a few moments while people join our session, but we have a really exciting session with 4 just absolutely amazing alums who are doing various things in the medical profession. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about what it is that excites you about Gettysburg College, what it is that excites you about the idea of preparing for a career in medicine, and certainly feel free to ask your questions. We do have a Q&A function that my friend and colleague Mary Smith will be monitoring, so we will leave time for questions and answers at the end. But for now, again, congratulations, class of 2025. And I'd like to start off with introductions. So Marc, you are going to be first, but please introduce yourself. Tell folks what your major was, your class year was, what you're doing now, and then you can pass it on to the next person.
Okay, thanks a lot, Daryl. I appreciate you guys asking me to join this. I'm Marc McCleary. I'm class of 2000, so back in the dark ages. It's been a little while. I had a great experience at Gettysburg. Went from Gettysburg on to Drexel University College of Medicine in Philadelphia. After that, I went and did my family medicine residency at St. Louis University and served 7 years in the Air Force after they had paid for medical school. And then got a job out here as a family medicine physician working for a Catholic health organization in Southern Illinois, right outside of St. Louis, where I served as a family medicine physician and also as a medical director for the medical group, and have been out here since 2005. So that's a little bit about me. I'll fill in a little more details as we move through the night, but I'll turn it over to Mary so she can tell us about her journey.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to meet you all virtually. Mary Fakunle. I am a class of 2012 from Gettysburg College. From there, I did my medical school training at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School in Newark, New Jersey. And I am now in my 3rd year of residency at UCSF, the Department of Urology. So very excited to be here and to talk about how great Gettysburg College is. And I will turn it over to Megan Murphy.
Awesome, thank you, Mary. My name is Megan Murphy. I'm class of 2011, so coming on that 10-year reunion. I went to Georgetown Medical School in DC. From there, I went to Jefferson in Philadelphia for internal medicine residency and chief residency. I'm now back at Georgetown for a fellowship in gastroenterology and hepatology. And then to continue the training, I'll be going to NYU in New York to specialize in inflammatory bowel disease or Crohn's and colitis. And last but not least, I'll pass it on to Fergan to round it out.
Thanks so much. So I'm Fergan Imbert, class of 2016. While I was there, I was majored in biology with a pre-med concentration. After graduation, I moved to Northern England, where I did my master's at the University of Lancaster in biomedicine. After that, I came back to the US and lived in Baltimore, working at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health as a research technologist. I spent about 1.5 years there, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the Lewis Katz School of Medicine at Temple University here in Philadelphia. I actually have to take my candidacy exam in a month, so interim candidate.
Well, thank you all for those introductions on what you pursued at Gettysburg and what you're up to now. So with what you pursued academically, I'd like to sort of draw some links. So if you could remind our audience members what you pursued academically to get to where you are, and that's from maybe even being undecided at first to deciding to enter a career in medicine. So what did you do academically, and how did that get you to what you're doing professionally now? And I know that that's a wide open question, but I think it's good for students to understand that sometimes people come in with a definitive idea, and sometimes they come in thinking, well, I don't know yet. I mean, obviously people who have an interest in medicine for a while. And Megan, I'm going to call on you first. So what did you pursue academically? What were you involved with outside of the classroom? And now, how does that link to what you're doing professionally?
Yeah, well, academically, I knew pretty much going in that I wanted to pursue pre-med. So day one, you meet with your academic advisor, and I was able to set that up. In my pre-med pursuits, it was pretty much a natural fit to become a health science major. A lot of the pre-med requisites are built into the major, which is nice because then some of your other elective classes, you have some more flexibility to kind of choose whatever interests you. So I ended up majoring in health sciences, minoring in biology and chemistry. But despite being a very science-heavy course load, was still able to do a lot outside of just the academics. Coach Jones was my track coach for 4 years. I think that's one of the unique things about Gettysburg is that you can be pre-med and still go straight from undergrad into med school as I did without a gap while doing a 2-season sport. It's not uncommon, and a lot of my teammates on the track team also pursued medical school. I was in a sorority with Mary, so that was another aspect that, again, you can kind of encompass it all academically, socially, athletically. And I think that definitely helped you for medical school, especially because you're focusing on teamwork, you're focusing on time management, and you're focusing on being a well-rounded human first and not just a textbook.
Thank you for that, Megan. And Mary, since you were mentioned, how about you next, please?
Yeah, I think I have a similar story to Megan. I think I knew, if not definitively that I was going to go to medical school, that I wanted to go along that health professions track. So I was certainly pre-med, and I actually did a biology major and minored in neuroscience. I initially was planning on minoring in music, which at Gettysburg, you almost have to audition or almost be invited to major and minor. And I did get accepted to minor, but I ended up minoring in neuroscience just because of all the coursework and things that I was already doing. But, you know, outside of academia, I was still able to pursue singing, which is what I love to do. So as a part of our a cappella group, which is upscale, like Megan mentioned, I was in a sorority. I did club rugby. I was a tour guide. I mean, the list goes on and on. So despite all of the rigorous science courses, biology courses, and labs and all that, there's plenty of time to do all the other things outside of medicine. And it really just makes you a very well-rounded student and a very well-rounded person. And it gives you perspective. I would say one of the really important things that I think I got out of it is that I really had a lot of fun in college. And so when I got to med school, I was really ready to buckle down. So, you know, I had an opportunity to work hard and also enjoy the social activities at Gettysburg, and then go on to medical school and not feel like I missed out on any of that. So, yeah, and yeah, that's it.
Well, and I can attest to that, Mary. You were pretty much anywhere that I would show up on campus, you were doing something in it. So it was cool to see what you've become. And Megan, of course, a joy to coach you. And now let's talk about Marc, who I interviewed when he was looking at colleges, period. But talk about what you pursued academically and how that links to you today, and non-academically as well.
Yeah, so I kind of knew from a pretty young age I wanted to go into medicine. And so when I looked at different schools, it always kind of came back to Gettysburg's science department was always came out above anywhere else I had looked. And so when I came in now, it's interesting being a class of 2000, like the health science major wasn't even available at that point. And neuroscience wasn't a minor. I mean, so there's been a lot of things that were in development when I was there that wasn't there. The science building that's there now was not there when I was there. That they broke ground for that as I was leaving. I like to think it was because of me, but it wasn't. So I was a bio major and a chemistry minor, and then I also was a resident assistant RA for a year, and then I was a resident director for 2 years, my last 2 years there. And so that was great because it got me to meet a lot of people outside of the major, and kind of work together as a team, and got to help incoming students. As a junior and senior when they were coming in, I was the RD of a freshman dorm, and so I was able to help that transition, from high school to college, both socially, academically, things like that. And just to echo what Megan and Mary said, it's the best part of college. Obviously, the academics are there, but the social and the fun. I mean, I played intramural sports, and just those are the things that, when you get done after those 4 years, you get to med school and you realize, okay, now it's time to focus in. And I can say from an academic standpoint, the joke in med school was no matter what we did the first 2 years, which are generally just academic stuff, people go, I know, Mark, you did this in college already. Because I found myself not realizing I was saying that, like, oh, we learned this in college. Oh, I got this. And people are like, I've never heard this before. I'm like, oh, and so that became the ongoing joke was, we know you did this in college already, so you got it. I'm like, hey, this is a pretty good commercial for the education I just got. So it was a great experience, and definitely set it up to make med school is never easy, but it set it up where it was not nearly as stressful for me as it was for some of the people I was there with, just because the foundation I got at Gettysburg was second to none.
Boy, Mark, you've almost given us a great segue there, and I think I'm going to use it. So Fergan, you were also someone, I mean, all of these folks had wonderful careers in and out of the classroom, and Fergan, you certainly are no exception. So take us from what you pursued academically and the many things you did beyond the classroom to now.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I majored in biology pre-med concentration because, like everyone else on the panel mentioned, we had this idea that we wanted to go to medical school when we graduated. But it was actually my time at Gettysburg made me realize that I did not want to go to medical school. And that was a good thing because I found that out, pretty early on and was able to sort of just make those adjustments. And I had a business minor while I was there as well. So just having those sort of different, ideologies and curriculums fusing together, I think that sort of made me start to think about medicine differently. But, like everyone else on the panel mentioned, I was also involved in a lot of different things. I was involved with the admissions office as a tour guide, admissions ambassador, senior admissions intern. I worked for Residence Life. I was a residence assistant, residence coordinator. I worked in the bookstore. I was on Bomb Squad, which is a hip hop dance team there. So, I got involved in a lot of other things that weren't purely academic. But in terms of no longer wanting to go to medical school, I think that was a great thing for me because I started to look at, again, medicine differently. And that's why I decided to pursue my master's. I pursued it abroad because I thought, why not? The opportunity presented itself. And so that's exactly what I did. But the transition for me not wanting to go to medical school anymore came from internship opportunities that I got at Gettysburg. So I had 2 research internships that, again, just really made me look at medicine differently and made me understand things and realize that my interests weren't more in line with the clinical aspect, but was more in line with the basic research aspect of medicine and science. And so that's what I decided to pursue.
So all of you have obviously had a great impact in thinking your way through your career path so far, and I am so excited to see what the trajectory is from here forward. But if you can reflect back a little bit, and as far as you want. So this could be first year professors, it could be senior professors, it could be projects that you've done, it could be research, and then things that you did after college, which Mark, you touched on a little bit. I mean, what's your path? What was your path, and who were the people in it, especially Gettysburg people, who really had a direct impact on what that path is now? And then we'll see where it goes later. So Mary, we're going to have you answer that first. So talk about the path you were on, and then we can answer a question at the end of this that was elevated in the Q&A. We had a student ask whether it's good to take the MCAT. I'll ask it during college or after college. So talk about your path and then your thoughts on when people should take the MCAT, even though for the people who are in the audience, it's a little ways from now.
Okay, yeah, I would say my path was not straight through from undergrad to med school, which I highly endorse, just for the record. So like I said, I knew I wanted to do something medically related. I think I decided somewhat late at my time at Gettysburg that it was definitively going to be medical school. And so I planned to take the MCAT the summer after I graduated. So I'd already planned to take at least a year off. I think also at that time, my application, I wanted it to be stronger. And I think that was feedback that I got from a lot of the professors in the biology department, professors that are on the medical school, forget what it's called, but the board that sort of makes the letter that they send from your college. You know, it was that my application could be stronger, which I also agreed on. So for me, the time off was just about building my my application as much as I could and trying to get experience. So I took the MCAT the summer after. I ended up taking it twice, which is fine. Sometimes you got to do it. And then I would say the most beneficial key to my journey was really trying to find a research job after college. Proved to be a little bit difficult. I feel like there are a lot of jokes about entry-level jobs wanting like 10 years of experience, and that's kind of how it felt. Graduating from college, you're like, oh, I have this fancy new degree, but then everybody wants all these years of experience. So I actually went back to, you know, sort of just the Gettysburg Alumni Association, just saying, you know, I just graduated and I'm looking for research, and I got connected to an investigator at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is one of the branches of the NIH, which everyone usually knows about. And it was specifically in Baltimore, which is where I'm from and where I was after college. And so I got the chance to be in a lab at the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And I worked there for 2 years in between undergrad and going to medical school. And I would say that even to this day, applying for residency, they're like, oh, you worked for NIH. It's, you know, it just, it carries such a long way. And I was just really grateful for that opportunity, the contact. You know, I got to contact Dr. Heichman, was the private investigator at NIDA, and I still had to apply and still had to do an interview, but I was just so almost lost in between undergrad and med school, and that was super helpful. So that was a key to kind of getting me into research and strengthening my application and on my way to medical school. So just a plug for taking time off once again and using the resources that Gettysburg allows.
So give me a quick, you know, I love that answer, and give me a quick sort of, how did Gettysburg connect you with opportunities? I mean, let's think about the number of people who might think about working at the National Institutes of Health, and then how many actually get to do it. So this is a sarcasm, of course, but did you just show up at NIH and say, hi, I'm Mary, and I think you should hire me? Or did some people help you along the way?
Yeah, no, I would say the first key was giving me the contact. So going back to Gettysburg, and actually getting the contact for Dr. Heichman. And I emailed Dr. Heichman, and he, you know, I'm trying to remember, but I believe that he had almost, in a way, presented to Gettysburg that he was looking for a student to work in his lab. And so then I just happened to be a student who was looking for research opportunities. So I got connected with him and I emailed him. And then he told me about the actual NIH program that is specific for students that are looking to go to medical school and grad school. And I actually didn't really know about it until I had gotten this connection from Gettysburg. So it was a chain of emails and people looking for other people and kind of being matched up in that way. And then eventually I did show up for the interview and say, hi, I'm Mary, I'm looking to do research. But I think it was just I for a while almost forgot that I could, you know, use Gettysburg as a resource for jobs and opportunities and internships and things like that. So it was just getting a name and getting a number and an email, which was really helpful.
Thank you so much for that. So Marc, same thing, you know, what was your path to get you to what you're doing now? Who were the people that helped you? How did Gettysburg's connections, internships, research, that sort of thing get you here?
Well, you know, I also didn't go straight to medical school. I had kind of thought about taking some time and, you know, and talking to some of my professors, it was like, you know, once you start, like you really can't stop. You know, once that ball starts rolling that first day of med school, your next, you know, 7 to 12 years is there in front of you. And you can pause, but it's a lot more difficult professionally to pause once you start medical school than it is before you start. And so I didn't take the MCAT. I did take it twice as well. The summer before my senior year, and then again in the spring of my senior year, knowing I was gonna take the following year off, and I actually was gonna go work at a camp up in upstate New York for a year, and just take that time to interview and just kind of like do something non-academic. And then I had the opportunity to actually teach high school for a year at a small private school in New Jersey. They lost their science teacher a couple of weeks before the beginning of the school year. He needed to go somewhere else, and so they called me. They knew I didn't have anything set in stone, so I took the opportunity to do that, which was a great experience, and loved the students. I could have done without the parents, but it was a good experience. And so then during that period of time as I was interviewing, initially the Army reached out and, you know, offered the health profession scholarship, and I was like, no, thank you, I'm not interested. Never in a million years would have thought about going into the military. Then then you start looking at bills and the cost of med school, and you're like, all right, I'll listen. And then after I listened to the Army, then I called the Air Force because I'm not nearly tough enough to be in the Army, and called the Air Force, and so the Air Force then wound up, you know, paying for med school, which I thought was a great experience. You know, I got good training. I did wind up spending 6 months in Afghanistan from 2010 to 2011, practicing medicine over there, taking care of a lot of foreign nationals, which is a great experience. And then essentially, you know, was debt free by 33 for med school, which would be hard to do if I had gone more of a traditional route. So so that was a good experience. And now as I've kind of reached the next point of my career where I'm getting more involved in administration, I'm cut back to 80% clinical and 20% administration, went and got a certified physician executive certification recently in order to kind of pursue that a little bit more. A lot of that ties back to my experience at Gettysburg, especially being an RA and an RD, was just those skill sets of learning how to listen, learning how to actually try to understand a problem before you try to give the solution, which I think as a type A person, we're all kind of geared to like, okay, I got the solution, without actually sometimes listening to the problem or actually listening to what the person is saying, assuming that what they're going to say. And so those were skills. I can still remember some of the training we did in residence life of leadership training, peer leadership. A lot of my job is peer leadership. I supervise fellow physicians, and which can be awkward at times. And so those sorts of things, a lot of skills from that harken back to my days, at Gettysburg, both how professors taught us and treated us as colleagues often, even though they were essentially authority figures, and then how to do that with fellow students as an RA, and now I'm doing that with fellow physicians in the new administrative role. So yeah, I think that throughout that time frame and realizing, just having that perspective of professors saying, listen, medicine's going to be there, because when you're in college, you're like, I just want to get done. Like, I want to get to med school, I want to get through my residency, fellowship, whatever, get done. And you lose perspective of the fact that a year here, 2 years there isn't going to make a difference at the end, but it could make a huge difference in your development and your experience level. And as Mary has insinuated, it can also make a big difference in getting into medical school, because those experiences you have, everybody that applies to med school is going to have a good GPA, is going to have a good college experience for the most part. I think it's better at Gettysburg than anywhere else, but they're still going to have that. And so those experiences that you have outside of that make you unique really help you stand out on an application. And sometimes you'll talk to people and you'll find out, man, they went to Johns Hopkins, they went to Duke, they did these marquee medical schools, and when you talk, you find out their GPA was the same as somebody else's, their MCAT scores were the same, but they did a year in the Peace Corps, or they did some research project, and all these things that on an application, when you're interviewing for med school, they go, well, that person's different than every other 3.8 GPA, at a good liberal arts college. And so those things, so don't try to rush the experience. I get it, you want to be done, but rushing the experience sometimes can be to your own detriment, both professionally and personally.
Thank you for that. And Fergan, you've had a couple of different alternative paths that I just call cool paths, actually. So talk about the path that you were on. You talked about how you found out that you didn't want the same kind of medicine. But for you, obviously, if you took the GREs, I want you to talk about your path, but also talk about the number of papers you've written from senior year, if you can remember, to now. Talk about the writing, the business side, the things you did outside of the classroom, and again, your path from then to now.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I thought I wanted to go to medical school, decided I did not when I was at Gettysburg. And again, like I said, it was partly because of an internship opportunity that I was offered, and that was through a Gettysburg network. So the parent of a student in my year, class of 2016, basically came to Gettysburg and said, I have this lab, I'm looking for students who will work for me over the summer, have this research and opportunities. And she, obviously her daughter was at Gettysburg, but she also thought that the Gettysburg students would be able to actually assist in progressing the research that she was looking to do. Again, that network and that sort of relationship was established because of Gettysburg, but it wasn't just offered. I still had to interview, I still had to meet and go through the process that anyone else who was being offered a position there would have to do. And it was from that sort of experience that, again, I realized that I liked more of the basic science aspect of medicine and research rather than the clinical side of it. And so I completed that summer, working with her. We published a paper while I was there. And then that was during my sophomore year. And then the summer after my junior year, she basically came back to Gettysburg, again, looking for new students, but specifically told me that if I wanted it, there was a spot there for me. So I went back again that summer and did another research opportunity there. The research was focused on autism spectrum disorders. Again, that sort of shaped what it is that I was thinking now of what I wanted to do after Gettysburg. And so that's when the idea of a master's came in. I started thinking a little bit about PhD, but again, I didn't think that I was necessarily ready for that. I wanted to, like Mary was saying, is just sort of like make yourself a more competitive applicant for that. And so I thought a master's would do just that. again, I ended up abroad just because of the opportunity presented itself. I thought, why not? It was a 1-year accelerated master's compared to a 2-year program here. Financially, it was also cheaper to do the master's abroad, believe it or not, even though I was paying the international fee, it was still cheaper to do it there. And when I finished that, I got, I was looking for work at that point. Again, I think it was at that point I was just too afraid to apply for the PhD. I think I, had enough training after the master's to apply, but that was just on me. So I figured, okay, I'll look for 1 more year of research opportunity, just really, get that down and then apply for the PhD. And I, was applying at a lot of different places, and I started to feel like I still wasn't employable for some reason. I mean, I wasn't hearing back from a lot of different places until finally I got contacted from one of the investigators at the Hopkins School of Public Health. And, he pointed out that he noticed that I went to Gettysburg, and he was familiar with Gettysburg because there were other research technologists at the School of Public Health from Gettysburg. I think at the time when I started, there was, I think, 5 other people at that school who graduated from Gettysburg who were research techs. And so the name sort of got me into the door, but, I still interviewed, I still met with a lot of different people, was offered that position, again, worked there for 1.5 years, and then applied for PhD programs. And I, interviewed for Temple School of Medicine, which is where I am now. And again, Gettysburg came up because I didn't know this at the time, but a Gettysburg grad had just started that program the year before. And the program director, his nephew was actually at Gettysburg at the time. So, you'll be surprised that, a small liberal arts college just has this sort of, name in a lot of different places. And it again, is so helpful in many ways. And it doesn't take away from the fact that, you are not, qualified, right? But it definitely does help when it has that sort of recognition. It puts a lot more faith in what the school can do for a lot of the students, especially when they recognize the name and think, I think this student will do well here because of what past Gettysburg students have done while they were there. So that's sort of been my path, sort of going from, I think I want to go to medical school, to actually, I think I want to do the research. So now I work in the neurovirology lab, and I study HIV infections of the brain's immune cells. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, I would still call that pretty darn serious medicine. And so, Megan, same question, because I know with working with you on a few things you did senior year, you had some really interesting experiences in medicine that brought you to where you are now. But could you share with our audience sort of, again, more about your path, your MCAT experience, but also some of those unique experiences that you had when you were an undergraduate at Gettysburg, in and out of the classroom, medically related and not, and then your path to what you're doing now and what you're about to do at NYU, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So despite my incredible drive to go straight from undergrad into medical school, I actually knew very little about what it actually meant to be a real physician and what that journey would look like. I come from a non-physician family, so it was a little bit overwhelming to start this process. And I really credit the professors at Gettysburg for their mentorship, and then also the alumni network, which was incredibly generous to their students. So very early, because again, I knew I wanted to go into medical school, I tapped into the Center for Career Development, and they offered a host of different experiences. So from initial, something like Bright Lights Big City, it was called, where we went to Philadelphia for a weekend and we toured all of the different health professors. We went to actually Jefferson Medical School, where I ended up later in my career. We toured different PT programs, PA programs, NP programs, and just met with alumni who were in that area. That was through the Center for Career Development. And that really piqued my interest. So then I signed up for several externships where essentially alumni volunteer to have active Gettysburg students work with them. So the first one I did was in Kentucky, and it was this incredible physician. She welcomed me into her home. I lived with her and her son for a week. I went to work with her every day, and she was the only doctor in the county. So we would start in the morning and go on rounds in the ICU, and then we would go into her office and just see primary care patients, and in a very impoverished area of rural medicine. So that was just eye-opening of, you know, all the facets of what a day-to-day doctor's life is actually like. And then the next summer, I spent, I think 2 weeks in Southern California, again, with a Gettysburg alum, and just going to work with him in his family practice out there. So it was more of a suburban feel, and just understanding, seeing that contrast between the two different types of medicine, even though they had very similar training, and just seeing the different options of, you know, one day when I become a doctor, what would my day-to-day life look like? Was really eye-opening. And then talking to them about their experiences, what their training was like, what their path was like. And then lastly, as part of the health sciences major, you had to do a capstone project. And my capstone project, I ended up working with a physician at what was then Pinnacle Health, but now UPMC Harrisburg Hospital. And we were doing research on basically diabetic training in underserved areas that were more urban. So we were in, you know, Harrisburg, and my job was to recruit patients for this diabetes study. So again, seeing that all different aspects of medicine, from suburban to rural to urban medicine, and then just meeting all of these alumni. The physician I worked with during my summer capstone, I'm still in touch with her to this day. We were on the phone last night. She came to my wedding. And it's just, again, there's no physicians in my family. I have reached out to her for every step of my career for advice and for insight, which has been awesome. And then I did go to med school straight through. So I took the MCAT, I guess it would have been spring of my junior year. And Gettysburg offered a course on site. So I think like Tuesday evenings, Thursday evenings, and half day Sundays, you with your MCAT course. And was it hard? Yes. I was also, like I said, with Coach Jones, so in full season. So Saturdays were spent at track invitational, Sundays were spent at MCAT courses. But I was very motivated to go straight through and not take time off. Was that hard in my 20s when my friends were making money and I was in the library on Saturdays? Sure. But now that I'm in my 30s and the end is in sight, as Coach Jones alluded to, I have, we'll do one more leg of training, which is completely voluntary. I could have been done 4 years ago, where I'll be focusing in Crohn's and colitis in my final year at NYU.
Thank you all. I'm just taking some time to absorb all that you said, and it's absolutely amazing. So a couple of things I want to know next. You know, one is based on something you mentioned, Fergan. I think a lot of times when people think, oh, it's a college of liberal arts and sciences, what does that have to do with science and medicine and research? So this might be a tougher question, and a couple of you can take this one, but it's about how a college of liberal arts and sciences is actually the best preparation for a career in any type of medicine. So I'm going to give that to one or two of you, and we'll surprise you with who that is. And then with a couple of the others, I want you to go more into the advising piece. So Megan, you just spoke. I'm going to call on you one more time, just like I did when I was coaching you, and I'd say one more time. So can you talk a little bit about the advising experience that you had from the first moment you expressed an interest in medicine, and how that worked you through, you know, because I can remember that spring semester of your junior year and how tiring it was to do a high-performing athlete, all the other things you did outside of the classroom and doing well, obviously, in the classroom. You know, we'll skip the part about that guy that demanded all that speech preparation in your senior year, but what was your advising experience like? We call it pre-health advising at Gettysburg, but what was your pre-med or medical advising like at Gettysburg? And what did you take from those experiences with those, you know, the externships, the long-term shadowing, that sort of thing? What made those great things for you?
Yeah, so I mean, the great thing about the pre-health advising is as soon as you express interest, it's available to you as a student. Like I said, as soon as I was designing my my first year curricular schedule, that was in mind. It was okay, you know, if you're going to try and do this in 4 years, we're going to take these courses to make sure you get these prereqs out of the way before your MCAT, and that's spring. And then it sees you through regularly. So at the time, Dr. Kristen Stempfli was the department chair of the health sciences, and she had a lot of connections to the medical communities, even though she was a PhD and not, I think she was an MD PhD. So she had a lot of connections also to Penn State Hershey. So I actually spent another week at Penn State Hershey in the summer doing a primary cares scholarship. And I remember when I interviewed at Penn State, it was just something easy to talk about, and that was a Gettysburg connection there. And then part of the healthcare advising, Mary alluded to it earlier, is they essentially make you go through and do a, basically like a med school interview, which is very daunting, but you create your personal statement, you create your, you get your letters of rec, you give a CV, you sit down in front of a panel of not just health professors, not just ones you might know, but different liberal arts professors and English professors and all these from all walks, and they interview you, and you wear a suit, and it's very nerve-wracking, but it prepares you, and they give very honest feedback. So they say, you know, this is unique that you were a student athlete, highlight this, you know, make mention of this unique experience in your personal statement. So you do get that one-on-one feedback. In addition, because your class sizes are smaller, it's much less intimidating to go and ask a professor for a letter of recommendation because they know your first name. They know more than just the grades on your, you know, on your tests. They know what you're doing outside the classroom. So the letters of rec are much more personable, which is nice. And then there was something else. Oh, the other part about, you know, not to steal someone else's question, but about the liberal arts education, everyone applying to medical school will take organic chemistry. Everyone will take bio. Very few people will ask about what was your organic chemistry experience like. But on my application, they did say, you know, what is this homelessness first year seminar you took, and how did that then become the theme house that you were in as a second year? And tell me about your sex and love and Jewish literature course. It's much more interesting to have things talk about like that than it is to talk about chemistry. And then now that I am 10 years into training, I realize that a lot of my job is talking on the phone and documenting. And that's documenting papers, that's writing research. So having a strong writing background is very important. And that's something I actually get feedback from my current attendings, is that I'm a good writer. And I fully attribute that to Gettysburg College.
Well, it was going to be a question I just asked to you, Megan, but let's blame Fergan. So Fergan, let's tie a College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Gettysburg College, to the medical profession. And just so you know, Mary and Mark, you'll be answering it too, because I knew that I was going to get some amazing answers, and here we go. So Fergan.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Megan and Mark earlier alluded to the sort of difference in getting this liberal arts education on top of your science training. So, you know, but to Megan's point, 100% true. Everyone who's applying to medical school has that pre-med rec. You know, we all took organic chemistry, we all took physics, we all took, you know, gen chem and intro to biology. But it's those sort of liberal arts classes that create a story and essentially creates a more well-rounded applicant and academic, really. But to what Marc was saying about the joke that they're saying, oh, you did this at Gettysburg already, didn't you? That I think that holds true for a lot of us in the medical field when we graduate. You know, we are exposed to so many different aspects of science, right? You know, even though I was majoring biology pre-med, you know, I took a paleobiology class. You know, we literally went digging for fossils across different states, you know, and I realized that a lot of my peers who went to larger universities, when they were majoring in biology, that's all they did, you know, and outside of the pre-med requirements, you know, they didn't take any other chemistry class outside of that. They didn't take any other biology course. It was just sort of how they were trained. And so even now in my PhD course, a lot of my peers talk about how, you know, they didn't really know how to use a pipette, right? Because unless you, in some biology courses, you don't have to do that. And so that's sort of, I think our training was very different when we went to a liberal arts college. It wasn't just about, you know, getting you from point A to point B, because we're going to get there, right? It's about sort of learning all of those small things in between that can sort of set you up in an advantage. So I think that's sort of what one of the important things about getting a science degree at a liberal arts college. I mean, I know for a lot of people it is very difficult to understand. I had to explain that to my parents as well. I mean, they knew that I wanted to go into the sciences, and they would always ask them, why are you going to a liberal arts college? I mean, if you know what you want to do, you know, just go out there and do it. But I definitely believe that it made, you know, me a better student, better academic. And again, to Megan's point, we will write a lot. And I also get compliments on how well I write now. And I also attribute that to my time at Gettysburg. You know, I complained about the amount of writing that we had to do back then, but I am so grateful for it now. It definitely makes writing all of my papers a lot easier.
And Fergan, what was it that sort of got you to think internationally for your master's program? Did you have any experiences as an undergrad that maybe made you think that way?
Yeah, so the university that I went to do my master's, I actually studied abroad there my junior year. So, you know, I got there as a study abroad student. I was able to take classes that weren't offered at Gettysburg, but also still, you know, went towards my biology major, so I wasn't behind on anything. Those classes went right onto my transcript. And I really, you know, I honestly enjoyed my study abroad experience. I thought it was great. The university is both nationally and internationally recognized and ranked. And so that sort of got me thinking about going abroad for the master's. Again, you know, it also being an accelerated program and cheaper definitely, you know, put it a little bit higher on my list. But again, you know, my experience there studying abroad definitely helped play into that decision.
So that answers one of the earlier questions in the Q&A. People pursuing medicine actually study off campus at Gettysburg and study abroad. Very popular options all over the world, but certainly Denmark is a popular option and several other places. The difference at Gettysburg is that when you talk about saving money, Gettysburg pays your airfare. If you're getting financial aid or scholarships, that travels with you. So that certainly makes our off-campus study and study abroad, as most people call it, an easy decision at Gettysburg, especially because all the credits transfer. So Mary, you are next. Again, Megan, Fergan, fascinating, but connect this College of Liberal Arts and Science experience and why it's good for medicine. So the Gettysburg education, why is it good?
Yeah, I say it's been touched on a lot, but I think it always comes back to that well-rounded student, that well-rounded resident, whatever you're going to end up being. That's only going to, you know, having the different experiences of liberal arts education is just going to make you that much more sought after as an applicant for whatever you do. I would say what I remember like going to medical school and talking to classmates about what they majored in, and it was always very specific, biochemistry or neuroscience. And then they'd be like, what did you major in? And I'm like, biology. And you know, I always felt like, oh man, it really didn't get specific, but I liked that because it meant that besides doing all those typical courses that we've mentioned, everybody takes biology and everybody takes organic chemistry. I also took invertebrate zoology. I also took neurobiology. And those were really, really fun classes that maybe at this point I don't use in my technical medical, you know, day to day, but it's information that was interesting to learn. And it was just facts that was just cool to have in my arsenal of knowledge. And so I think having, even just in biology department, having the different exposure to the different types of biology, and then you go beyond that. I took, I forget what it's called, but I'm terrible with names, but I took a music course where we played instruments and we learned dances. That met a requirement, and it was so different from my science courses where I'm in class and in lab, and it was just something different. It was, you know, nice to have that course. And then what Fergan alluded to, which is what I was definitely going to talk about, going abroad. So I studied abroad in South Africa, and I did a community health and social policy program in Durban, South Africa. And you can do it even as a pre-med or a science major. You don't have to, you know, I fit in all those classes. And I think when I went abroad, the courses I took didn't necessarily transfer over, but I came back and I made it work, and I did extra classes and I did what I needed to get all the requirements in. So having the opportunity to go abroad was unique. I don't know that a lot of other medical applicants can necessarily say they did that if they go to a big university or if they don't have that liberal arts experience. So just very well-rounded things to talk about. I talked about studying abroad in South Africa for my residency interviews, so years and years later. So I think that's what it comes down to.
Well, thank you, Mary. So many interesting interlocking experiences. And Marc, I'm going to sort of give you the double question because you're the one who sort of kicked off this subject long ago. So, you know, you've already touched upon the value of the liberal arts experience, but here's your double question. Are you ready? I'm going to give you the, you know, where did research figure into the influence in your career path? And probably just as important, I mean, what advice would you give to these young students on how they should look at this idea of pursuing medicine? Because you've all mentioned, my gosh, these wonderful connections, internships, connections with hospitals, Johns Hopkins, and many others. So you've had all these phenomenal experiences that Gettysburg College gave to you. But now let's distill it. What was the thing, research-wise or experience-wise, that made it medicine for sure for you? And what advice would you give to these folks who are in our audience who are thinking about medicine? Why should it be Gettysburg that prepares them?
Well, I had done research in Dr. James's lab between my junior and senior year. I spent the whole summer on campus and did research. And I think the thing for me that was kind of enlightening is knowing I wanted to go into medicine, knowing I wanted to go into clinical medicine, but doing the bench research and understanding everything that goes into that aspect of it. It helps me decipher when I'm reading papers and trying to figure out whether this is a good study or not, and that sort of thing. Obviously, that's helpful, but also just the level of respect you have for the folks who are spending their lives doing that research, that we can then use that information to kind of, you know, on the front lines with the patients, and just to understand how that teamwork goes. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you get from the Gettysburg experience is how everything works together. And then, you realize how medicine, every specialty works with every other specialty, and we're all in it together. And then when you get outside the specialties, when you get into the research side of things, like Fergan said, and how that's all part of the same team, and how you realize it's really not that distant from the person that's sitting there with a white coat talking to the patient sitting in a chair versus the person that's in the lab with the white coat, using the pipettes. We're all in this together. I just wanted to add one thing to the liberal arts discussion. As a primary care provider, I think one of the aspects is so much of what I do is preventive medicine. I'm trying to keep people from having to see Megan and Mary by good lifestyle choices and things like that. And so much of whether or not I'm going to be successful is whether I can build a relationship with the person sitting in front of me, and whether I can show that I'm invested in their life, whether I can make a connection, and whether they'll listen to my advice on those things that they may not really want to do, but they realize that I'm trying to help them, and I care about them. But part of that is understanding and connecting them at a cultural level, at a personal level, all of those things, which is where that liberal arts education comes in huge. Because when you're dealing with science is one way to think about things. But when you get into the liberal arts side of things and you start taking into account other cultures and the way that things have to be thought of differently, and people's backgrounds are different. And when you get into these discussions in liberal arts classes with people from different backgrounds, and you realize, well, wait a minute, there's different ways to think about this. I always thought I was right, and then realize that you may be right and they're right too, because you're just having different perspectives coming together, which you don't really get that in science, because science is, this is what it is, and then you move on. But when you deal, that idea of being able to meet in the middle, and that plays a huge role in medicine. And so when you're talking about being successful, yes, the well-roundedness helps you get into med school, but when you're done with your training, you're actually out taking care of patients, it plays a huge role in being successful at that, which is ultimately really what you want to do. I mean, that's why you're choosing this career, is you want to be able to help patients. And so I think the liberal arts aspect of it plays a huge role, whether it's, not necessarily because I can answer Jeopardy questions on liberal arts classes that I took, but because I do impress my kids sometimes with Jeopardy questions, but it's more because of that connection you can make when you just understand the world in a broader sense, and it makes you better at whatever you're going to do in your career, medicine included. The science is a given, but that extra piece can go from being a good scientist doctor to being a good physician that actually the patients want to see and connect with. I think the liberal arts education, especially liberal arts education at Gettysburg, plays a big role in that.
Thank you, Marc. So Mary, same. What advice do you have for people wanting to pursue medicine? Why Gettysburg?
I would say for students that want to pursue medicine, the beauty or the benefit of Gettysburg, which was my experience, was just, or I guess if you want to pursue medicine, is that you get just such a wide variety of experiences, both in and out of the classroom. And you really get a chance you get opportunities to really determine if medicine is a career for you. I think one thing, or one trap that people can fall into, especially with medicine, is that they go in doing it for reasons that they don't find for themselves. They go in because maybe there's a family influence, or because they think that it's a prestigious career that will look good. And I think Gettysburg, by its nature, the fact that it's liberal arts and there's so many different departments and things that you have to get a piece of, really makes you figure out if medicine truly is for you, and if that's the career path you want to go on. I think, like Fergan, you might go in with one idea and then you get sort of pulled into another direction, and that's totally fine. Undergrad is the time to figure that out. You don't want to get into medical school, get in too deep, and then realize that maybe it's not for you, or maybe you don't enjoy it as much as you would like to. I think also Gettysburg College just really makes it possible to figure out what your interests are in terms of biology or in terms of medicine. I think you get a lot of different experiences to figure out whether you're fascinated by medicine, It can either be in a lab, it can either be externships, internships, just in the classroom. So I think just the exposure to different fields outside of science, in addition to the wide breadth of science within, will give you a chance to really figure out if it's for you.
Thank you, Mary. Fergan, why Gettysburg? If you want a career in any sort of medicine, why Gettysburg?
Yeah, so again, I think we've all sort of touched on it in that Gettysburg gives all of us access to so many different ideologies of science, right? It definitely shaped, the path that I took, but I think one thing about Gettysburg is that I still appreciate to this day is the sort of network and the love that everyone has for the college. I mean, some of my peers now in the cohort with me, so they take 15 students a year in the program I'm in. And, a lot of them went to really large universities, Harvard, Hopkins, Tulane, all of these amazing schools. But not once have I heard them talk about their experience in the sciences in the way that I've talked about it, but then also in the way that I know other students from Gettysburg have experienced their time majoring in the sciences. And I think that speaks a lot to just how Gettysburg looks at the sciences. I mean, we understand that this is sort of, a rigorous path. My time in the sciences at Gettysburg was not easy. Again, I came in thinking I wanted to go to medical school. The first 2 years were very difficult for me. I wasn't performing as well as I wanted to. I wasn't performing as well as my peers were. But again, because we had such small class sizes, I never felt intimidated about going to my professors and asking for their help, and saying, I didn't do as well as I'd hoped on this exam. How can you help me? And so I think that was one aspect of, Gettysburg that a lot of other people who might have gone to a larger university did not have access to. They didn't have access to their professors, didn't have, access to sort of that sort of advisory group to sort of figure it out and make sure that if they wanted to stay in the sciences, what should they do to continue on this path? Again, I'm very grateful for my Gettysburg experience. I can honestly say I don't think I would be where I am today without having gone to Gettysburg specifically for the sciences. No regrets.
And so Megan, again, advice for people, why Gettysburg?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Gettysburg is everyone there wants you to succeed. That's your professors, your mentors, the alumni, and they have the resources to do so. And success can look like a lot of things. It can be getting into your top medical school program. It can be making sure that you're pursuing all avenues that you feel really gratified in your college experience. It could be completely changing your career path. And success looks different for everyone. I think oddly enough, my roommates were all health science majors. One of them is now a nurse at Penn and is pursuing her NP. One is in hospital admin at the NYU School of Medicine. And then one is really successful at medical sales. All of us have the same degree. And all of us are really happy and look back at our time at Gettysburg with such fondness and gratitude. And like I said, it's really the community of people that are there that are so excited and so happy to see you succeed in your career. Even here we are 10 years out.
Well, what I'd like to do first is thank the four of you for just being so amazingly thorough, warm, engaging, brilliant, and several other superlatives, because I think what our audience is getting is that you can take different paths and have different careers in the field of medicine, but that Gettysburg College, through parents and alums and all sorts of people who respect Gettysburg College at some of the finest research places and medical schools in the world, that Gettysburg makes it possible. So to our alums, your eloquence, your ability to speak about the power of the experience, your ability to detail the number of things that connected Gettysburg to your current successes. I cannot thank you enough for being with us this evening, and for Mary especially, coming straight from surgery to be here. Greatly appreciate it. Again, to all of our students who are in the class of 2025, congratulations to you. And if you're thinking about medicine, obviously these are 4 of many examples who are absolutely outstanding. So thank you to our alums, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening and take care.